Thank you. So I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction about who I am. I'm going to be talking about design thinking. Hands up, how many of you guys are aware of design thinking as a concept? Have utilised it? Awesome. Okay. I realise it's weird, a data scientist talking about this stuff, but hopefully by the end of this talk you'll think it's totally normal and fine and I'll want to go do it. I'm going to be talking about design thinking in action, so this is going to be how we've approached this at Rare Ltd / Microsoft, which I will explain. And then I've just got a couple of resources to kind of run through. So this is me with a lot less tattoos. They really escalated in the past year. I am basically a data scientist at Rare Ltd, so we're a Microsoft first-party studio. So we make Xbox games. We have a super long lineage of making awesome games. So we made GoldenEye. We've done a ton of other stuff more recently. Was that little GoldenEye whoop? Nice. We U2 banned us playing as Oddjob as a teenager because that was the LAN party requirements in mind. So more recently we've made Sea of Thieves. Any Xbox gamers in the house? No? Okay, this is fine. If I'd have said this at EGX, it would have been like, yes, obviously. So Sea of Thieves is what we like to call the pirate game. So there was Assassin's Creed Black Flag a few years ago, but we've kind of tried to take the genre a little bit further. It's a massively open world game as a service, so it's always up, it's always live. We have kind of a monthly cadence and updates, and it's generally been a big, I think, transformation piece for us as a company. So we're a first-party studio, as I said, but also Microsoft more generally. In the past few years, we've really moved from this release cycle of a console game or a PC game to something that always needs to be live, and audiences have huge demands. There was a really interesting quote not long ago, actually, on a call on basically a Netflix kind of profit margins call, and they were saying that their biggest competitor is Fortnite, and it's completely the same for us. One of our biggest competitors is Netflix, it's Twitter, it's Facebook, it's anything that will kind of pull you away from using our platform as a service. And I think if we look at the way the industry is going, especially within Xbox, and then also you've got Google Stadia offering, which is their kind of cloud offering for gaming, it's going to become more and more apparent. So previous to that, I was at Virgin Media, which in Jess's regression analysis ranked very lowly. And that was a really interesting place to work because that was kind of around is there anyone here from telecoms, actually, from TalkTalk, Sky, or anything like that, or has experience within that industry? Okay, I think one of the interesting things about that space is that it is essentially a tech company that sometimes doesn't treat itself like one. So I think if you've worked in any of those environments, you'll find that actually a lot of the challenges are what we see kind of at Microsoft and at Google and at Facebook in terms of scale, in terms of the amount of data you need to crunch, but it's often the case that you don't have that infrastructure. Previous to that, I was at 383, which is a digital agency in Birmingham who has kind of a multitude of really cool clients. And then I was at Penguin Random House, and I was also at a social media startup for like 4 years. I'm on Medium and LinkedIn as Holly Emblem. But what I want to talk to you about today is design thinking and hopefully encourage some new, I guess, mindsets and methodologies which I think might be helpful. So design thinking, as it says here from the awesome resource that is the Interactive Design Foundation, it's an iterative process in which we seek to understand the user, challenge assumptions, and redefine problems. And you might be wondering why, as a analytics or BI team, we're actually interested in this, and I can provide some context on that. So we launched Sea of Thieves in March 2018, and it was a really interesting time for us. It was the first time we'd launched this service. It was the first time that we had to make kind of dedication points around uptime, and it was also the first time we'd ever really committed to a cadence around releases and iterating. And everything that you guys do as product managers or as data scientists on more typical products, this is so new within the gaming space. People aren't used to this. So everything that you might take for granted around agile and kind of having a feedback loop on stuff was just bizarre. It was just not how things were done. So what we found as a team, and we're going through this process now, so this is why this is, I guess, a really interesting point to go through this with you guys, is that as a data team, we were really good at servicing certain types of stakeholders. And I'm not sure if this is something you guys have experienced, but if I look at how companies are structured, you'll typically have design, you'll have product managers, you'll have engineering, you'll have customer support and sales. And actually, if you're a data team, you'll find a natural cadence with engineering and customer support, because typically those guys are either desperately in need of numbers because they want to find out how much stuff they can put on a server before it falls over, or they're a customer kind of service rep who has got a player that's saying X, Y, and Z has happened and I didn't get A. So we found that we had really, really good uptake within those departments. But I'm going to be honest with you, we struggle with design, and we still do. Within game design, it's very much still a kind of art as opposed to a science, and this was the first time really that we had this opportunity to kind of, I guess, change hearts and minds within there and show how iteration works, show how feedback loops work. So this is where design thinking came in for us, and this is just as much about applying design thinking techniques to our end user, our players, as well as to ourselves internally, and having a reflection point around it. So the core part of design thinking is to help us observe and develop empathy with the target user. And for us, actually, this target user, yes, it's players, but it's also internal teams that we don't have reach with, who will not include us in daily stand-ups because they don't see the relevancy of it, who will design features where they think, actually, this is the best bet. And you know what? Sometimes that's okay, because sometimes we don't actually have the capability to support around design, but sometimes we do. So it's about understanding and changing that conversation, and I'll talk through now how we kind of approach that. So this is the first kind of thing that I want to suggest as a bit of a mind shift change. We were super sympathetic. We were like, oh, you know, you've launched that thing and it didn't work. Oh, you know, that's a shame. We had to move to here. We had to be in the boat, to borrow a CFU's analogy, with designers. We had to ensure that we were attending as much stuff as possible with them. We had to ensure that we were not just picking up requirements from them about, can you tell me about X, Y, and Z, but understanding the reasons why they were asking for that thing. And I want to kind of draw attention to something that I thought was super interesting, and it was a technique that I learned at the Stanford d.school, name drop, which was, we did this icebreaker session, and it was with this K-12 teacher who was awesome, and she pointed out something super interesting. When I was talking to my nephews in San Francisco, and they were telling me about baseball, and they were telling me about math, and they were telling me about how they want to be engineers at Google when they grow up, and I was like, this is so interesting, you guys, this is awesome. I can't believe you want to go do this stuff. Can you show me how to play jacks? Oh, wow, so-and-so plays for the Giants. I don't know nothing about baseball. But, you know, I was trying to go on this journey and be super empathetic and kind of understand where they're coming from. If I talk to my colleagues on a bad day on a Monday morning and they're like, oh, yeah, you know, I wanted to do this thing and it didn't work, I'm like, yeah, it's a shame. Imagine applying the same amount of empathy that we do when we talk to kids about the things they're passionate about as to people in our team. Even if we know that they're going to go in front of us in the coffee machine, even if we know that they're probably not going to listen to us, imagine having this feeling and idea that everyone is wonderful, right? And I thought this was such a refreshing way of looking at things. If we, and I'm not saying treat your colleagues like children, but I'm saying if you can approach the challenges that they have and the insecurities that they have and the fears that they have with a sense of wonder, if you can treat it as if you're talking to your nephew about baseball and you know nothing about baseball and you're taken to a Giants game and it's really awkward because you just played rounders as a kid. If you can have that kind of rapport, then you can start to open doors. And I just thought this was a really interesting kind of way of looking at stuff, right? Like, if everything is wonderful and everything is change and everything is innovation and everything is future, if we see every opportunity like that, then chances are we're going to get brought along the journey, as opposed to, yeah, I can have those KPIs for you soon and that's great, and yeah, I can build you a classification model, but you probably won't even use it. And that's where we were, right? And it sucked and everyone felt real bad all the time. But it's not just a feel-good routine that makes us all feel better about coming to work. There's actually real kind of facts behind it. I'll kick off in the middle if that's okay. So The Guardian recently went through this exercise and they completely rebranded their entire digital experience based around design thinking. So they got to the real under the skin of what the users wanted, and they applied empathy, and they tried to understand where their users are coming from and how they could adapt the experiences to improve them. Harvard Business Review, which I am a big fan of, They analysed 50 projects over 7 years, and they found that applying design thinking within those projects was a huge predictor of future value and if those things were successful. And Forrester have also conducted some research, and they found that it can be a driver of huge ROI growth to apply design thinking to your projects internally. So it's not just about, being super nice to everyone and being like, that's so cool, can't believe you're making this thing. There's also real kind of business value to it, and I've got to admit, when I spoke to my director about applying this kind of methodology, he genuinely thought I'd gone a bit weird in San Francisco, but I backed it up with this stuff and it was okay in the end. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how we've applied this stuff, right? Because I think that's the most valuable bit. I think we can all kind of go home and we'll go to work and treat our colleagues and our loved ones with a sense of wonder and enjoyment and all of that stuff, but also we kind of need to do some business stuff. So this is where we were, and I'd be really interested to hear from the room afterwards if this is where you guys have kind of found stuff within BI and data science and knowledge teams. Can I just get a bit of a hands up who here is kind of working within an analytics team, like as a data scientist, data analyst? Cool. I'd be really interested if this represents your life, because I've worked in a lot of these teams and this tends to happen. We were really focused on after the fact analysis, so someone would ship something and 3 weeks later we'd tell them if it was good or bad, whether they wanted to hear it or not, whether they'd moved on or not, whether they were just super annoyed at the fact that we were beating them over the head with like, this didn't perform. Again, if I take it back to, in my eyes, you're all wonderful, telling someone that the thing that they built sucked probably isn't going to help. Solutionizing with minimal input from stakeholders. So what we would do is we'd get some requirements thrown over from the fence, from a design team, and then we'd be like, oh, okay, so they've given us, they want to understand if pirates are doing this thing. Okay, so I'm going to go build this thing for 3 weeks, and then I'm not going to talk to anyone about it. I'm not going to go to their stand-ups and see if they've pivoted. I'm not going to grab a coffee if I see Nigel over there and he's thinking about this thing. I'm just going to carry on, and I'm going to assume that it's fine. And you can probably guess how this narrative ends. People pivot, people change, and then we're left in the corner going, well, we built a Power BI dashboard and no one used it. And that sucks, right, for us, and it sucks for our stakeholders because they've already moved on and we haven't. We've not followed the conversation. Again, this more broadly points to a mismatch between stakeholders and outputs. They just want some numbers. We give them a fully fledged Power BI deck. We give them an API endpoint that they can hit, but they're not even technical designers. They're just prototyping stuff in Unreal, and they're very confused by our existence. And then gaps in data quality and collection, and this is my biggest bugbear, I think. So the chain of events which should happen is that we should talk to designers and we should understand the most important features that are happening. And we should understand how do you want to understand how people use this thing? Is it even important if we understand how people use this thing? And I feel like sometimes that's not a question we ask ourselves, particularly in an analytics space. We just assume we want everything. And actually, we're moving away from that. We're trying to really understand, is this worth going deep on? Can we just go wide on it and kind of gather enough stuff and then feed that into our inputs and see if it's important and then go deep? So we had this, and we still have this really interesting landscape of the depth we will go to on some niche feature. Oh my gosh. But then you want to know if someone's hit a thing? No, sorry. So having almost like a bit more of a process and a bit more understanding of what it is people need to know, and then not going deep just because you're super passionate about a thing is pretty huge. So why were we here? Well, we aren't listened to by X, and that X could be product. This is over the space of career. It could be product managers. Sorry, product managers, I love you, but some people in analytics teams don't. It could be engineers. It could be designers, like we saw at Rare. It could be the office dog, which happens to me a lot. It sucks, but yeah, we aren't listened to by X. We are brought in too late on a project, so our impact is limited. I feel like every analytics team has had this problem since people could count. Like, honestly, the amount of times that a thing will ship and then it'll be like, oh, did you add the tracking? No, I didn't add the tracking. Oh, I'm sorry. Like, that is 100% every team I've worked in. If people would just listen, I have the right ideas, which is a genuine quote from at some point in my career. And this is, this is around almost like a savior complex, right? Like, I have the data, I have the numbers, so therefore I assume that I know best. And my biggest thing on this is, and I probably say this too much at work, you can be right and alone, right? Like that's the price sometimes. Like if you choose that hill to die on, you can just be up there being completely right and 100% objective and factual, and no one's listening because people aren't bought in. So that's a really, I think as quantitative people or qualitative people or generally people that work with numbers, that's a really like hard thing to have to swallow, that sometimes you kind of just need to go, yeah, sure, and bite your tongue, because the sacrifice sometimes of being right is these two, because people don't like a know-it-all. So where we want to get to is becoming proactive, not reactive to requirements, so kind of getting ahead of the curve, and I think the things we were hearing from Twitter are super interesting on that. Like, that's still very much a journey we're on. Building things our stakeholders need. This is huge for us. So instead of getting a requirement that's thrown over the fence, we work in the countryside, but they're not literally fences between us. We work in barns. It's very rural. And work on solutions together, not in isolation. So bridging these two things here. Instead of getting some requirements and then just busying away and then being really sad when they don't land, understanding essentially how we can bridge this gap. So what we have kind of used to get under the skin of the requirements from our business is this design thinking process. Have you guys seen this before? Can I get a little hands up? Cool. This has been pretty much a rock, I think, for our team in terms of building engagement with stakeholders and kind of understanding where they're coming from. So starting from the, oh my gosh, I see what you mean about the right and left thing. That is really jarring. So starting from the far side and the blue side, we've got interviews, kind of shadowing, seeking to understand, and non-judgmental. This is actually easier if you're new. So I joined Rare like 6 months ago, and it was really easy for me to play the new card and be like, I don't know anything. Can you tell me about your role and your purposes in here and what you think of my team? Define is the next one. So understanding challenges and pain points is huge. And actually, I'll be sharing some kind of processes around this so you can start to understand the themes, and there is always themes, would be my feedback. Sharing ideas, so encouraging the idea that all ideas are worthy, even if it's not something that you've done. I think getting out the mindset of this is the one pathway we have to execute on analytics is huge. Prototyping, which will come super easy to designers and product managers, but actually as an analyst or a data scientist who wants to achieve the best model output as possible, that can be horrific. So one of the things that we've been trying to do is go, look, this isn't the most accurate thing, but it gets us some of the way there, and if you want to buy in, then we can go and do this for 3 months, but if not, it's fine and no one's going to cry or get upset. So fast AI is great for that. I'm now a big fan of that. And then understanding kind of what works, role play and iterating quickly. I realise if you say role play to kind of a group of engineers, then they get the fear. What that literally means is going, did it work for you as this person? Did you enjoy using this thing? So it doesn't have to be a whole HR or way day experience. So I'm going to talk through some tools basically to kind of give you some stuff to use within this, so within your teams. And the first one is super obvious, but check your biases. No, honestly, check your biases. So this is huge, right? So if you come into established teams who, in my experience, have had a year of having this game life, they'll have opinions about people because it's natural to form judgments, right? John isn't a numbers person, or, you know, Cheryl ignores me when I present this stuff. Honestly, I don't care, and you shouldn't too. You need to stop now thinking about this stuff and just go, let's assume everyone's wonderful and they're all going to tell us about baseball and be awesome. So limiting yourself and your others by going, they'll never talk to me, is nonsense. And that's the first thing you need to do, is kind of go, okay, I'm just going to blank slate this 100%. I know we've had bad times in the past, but we're going to move on. So leave your baggage at the door, and this is the hardest thing, and this has been super challenging for our team. We ran a series of stakeholder interviews, and it probably, and this isn't the first time I've done this, but one of the things I've seen throughout is it really hurts to be in a meeting room and hear that your stakeholders don't use your stuff or don't look at your stuff or find this tool really confusing, and actually they've been waiting to tell you for 5 years, which was one of the examples, but didn't want to hurt your feelings. So generally we probably all work with pretty good people who will be nice and will pretend to use the thing that we give them, and letting them know you don't have to be nice anymore, you can just be honest, is a huge kind of wake-up call, I think. So yeah, don't assume that people aren't numerically literate. I think one of the worst things I've ever heard is someone asking a product manager to show their GCSE maths results before they gave them a report. Don't do that, that's silly. Don't do things like that. Listen and don't put your agenda on anything. I feel like as quantitative teams, we can often try and solutionize, and sometimes that's not what we're here for. We're here to just kind of provide a bit of insight and give people the chance to go on that journey themselves. So now we're completely free of biases. We're going to treat all of our colleagues like they're the most wonderful people in the world. We're going to talk to them with this new sense of wonder and enjoyment, like we would our nephews or our nieces. Feels really good, right? Once we've reached this state of zen, I would say qualitative interviews are huge. And what we've been using is a technique called jobs to be done. Has anyone utilised this in the room? Cool. So this is mainly comes from like Harvard Business School and stuff from Clay Christensen, but I find that the following quote from Theodore Levitt really sums it up well, which is people don't want to buy a 1/4 inch drill, they want a 1/4 inch hole. And that's huge, right? Like where we were is here. We were providing drills, but actually they just wanted to know some stuff, and it could have been user interviews, it could have been this or that. But we assumed because we have this one pathway of quantitative data into reporting that was what everyone wanted, and turns out they don't. But that's a huge wake-up call. Understanding those jobs to be done is really critical for the success of your team to be embedded across the business. And you don't have to do this alone. So here are some examples of the kind of questions that we ask. So tell me about how you looked for a product and tried to solve your problem. So we have a lot of designers that look at Twitter, that look at Reddit for research. And they were super interested in about, we tried this social media tool to get sentiment, but it didn't quite work because of this. The thing that they're interested in is how people feel about their product, right? How people feel about the games that they're playing. So we then go, okay, so what did you try? What did you not try? And there can be a little bit of pushback because sometimes they feel like they should have told you about their secret analytics work. I had one designer being like, I'm really sorry, I just wanted to look at it myself and I should have told you guys. And it's like, it's all right, we're not ganging up on you. Understanding the things that they're trying to do and then just acknowledging that, then just going, okay, you're cool, you want to do that thing is huge. And then the next step on this is sharing and capturing. And this is really good as a team effort. So getting all of your team together after you've done user interviews, writing out the individual quotes and themes on Post-its, and then kind of thematically, as you could see, kind of just putting them across the board. And you'll start to see clusters. Like one of the things that we've really noticed is that people want to understand intent. For us, that's huge within gaming. And super challenging with an open world. So if you're on Candy Crush, you've pretty much got a set path, right? No offense to anyone who's working at King, different challenges to open world. But for our game, you can do 1,000,001 different things, and you can interact with players, and you can interact with AIs, and you can, no player will have the same experience. Part of our thing is creating and enabling unique player stories. So sometimes feeling and intent is what we need, and we've literally just been through this exercise, and everyone we spoke to was talking about that, and it's not something that we share or index on at all at the moment. We have nothing within that, but everyone was kind of screaming out to understand what intent looks like. So again, understanding and theming up once you've spoken to everyone is huge, and it's also quite cathartic, I think, as a team, because you'll start to see patterns bubble up. You'll start to see people saying they love a certain thing but hate another thing, and actually having an open conversation about how you can improve that stuff is really powerful. I love these. So has anyone utilised how might we use before? Cool. So this is once you've got your kind of theme. So if I follow on with the intent one, this is how might we understand and report on player intent. How might we is a very first step at solutionising. So it's how might we better serve an audience that doesn't want to look at dashboards. That could be one. And yeah, here's some. So how might we make our data more accessible and inclusive for our audience? So we have people who are super visual, right? And they don't want to spend time looking at, I'm sorry, Microsoft, Power BI dashboards. Some people do and they love it, and that's fine. We can service those guys all day. But then we also need to think about how we can take these people along on this journey, because sometimes they're too polite to tell us that actually this isn't quite what I need right now. And then, a more broader one is how might we best support our team's goal of getting players into the best session possible as fast as possible. And I think you can see with these how might we's, they aren't leaning on any particular doors of we're going to write an algorithm that predicts the best experiences and therefore changes the RNG to serve that, because that might not be what we need, but that was how we were approaching it previously. And we might say here, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that our Power BI dashes are hitting X, Y, and Z and only have this kind of layer. And again, that is useful and good, but it's probably not hitting the job to be done here, right? Which is I find the reports you give me challenging and I'm having to look elsewhere. And again, here, we could build churn prediction models, and we have done, but we can also kind of just look at, let's talk to people and understand what happened in their session and how they felt about it afterwards. So once you've kind of gone through this process of talking to people, having a bit of a cathartic theme session, how might weing, which tends to get you out of the catharsis pretty quick, because people then love coming up with solutions for problems generally. Finding themes and then bundling ideas is huge. So what I would say is that you'll typically cluster around 3 or 4 key themes. So for us, what we have seen is intent, sentiment, interviews, research, motivations, all of that stuff has come out consistently that we want to focus on. So from there, it's kind of understanding actually what are the best ways and how can we best serve this stuff and how can we theme those things up so it hits all those stakeholders. Similarly, live ops, how can we best ensure that we're really detecting anomalies? How can we best ensure that we're serving this team? How can we best ensure we're alerting this team if anything goes awry? Another theme that we found in terms of an underserved market within our team. And then the next bit is kind of around prototyping. So this, I think, is the bit where we've struggled the most. I think if you're in an analytics team, you'll kind of recognize that, yeah, you can build dashboards super quick, but it's really hard to build ML models that predict stuff super quick. So let's say you've got kind of a couple of ideas that you want to test, sketch them. Like say, I could build you this thing that will do this and it will do this, this and this. Do you want it? Not as aggressively as that. But having that conversation and not committing to a 3-month build to a new alerting system or a 6-month build for anomaly detection across multiple streams, just going, look, we could do this stuff, but actually is this valuable to, is a really good process, because we went through this and someone went, no, I don't actually want this. Can you do this instead? And it's like, cool, okay. We've not spent 3 months of our lives building a thing and then getting sad because you won't use it. So my tips for prototyping is just give people a basic summary of the prototype, so let them experience it for themselves afterwards. It can literally be, oh, this is proper designery, but you can do like, paper prototyping of a new reporting system, of a new, visualizing a new algorithm, say actually the player might see this instead of that. And then just follow up with questions, so ask how they felt trialing it and ask lots of whys, like why did you choose that thing? And generally people will be super polite, and it takes a little while to knock on that door and get them to be brutally honest, depends who you talk to. But let them know that it's okay to be like, this prototype sucked and it wasn't what I had in mind, because that gets us away from the weird situations where we're throwing stuff over the fence and then getting it back and then going, oh, you didn't want that at all. And then the last one is just around iteration. So nothing's ever done, and product managers get this, and we all in theory get this, but actually as analytics teams, this is hard because we're all kind of perfectionists and we want to build the best thing possible. But you can ship an MVP of something, right? And then I'd rather have 10 people kick down my door to get new features than build the whizziest thing in the world that then no one utilizes. So just as we expect our game as Sea of Thieves to iterate, and it has this monthly cadence cycle, and we expect features to improve, we should expect the same from ourselves. We should hold ourselves up to the same kind of values that we're putting out there. And I think for quantitative teams and qualitative teams as well, I keep making an arbitrary divide, which is pointless. No more arbitrary divide narrative. For teams that work with data, whether that's qual or quant, getting away from that perfectionist route and going, actually, well, done is sometimes better than perfect, I think is huge. So 3 things if you want to kind of go and test this stuff, with a bonus restate of definitely treat your colleagues with wonder, because they are pretty cool if you give them a chance. Check yourself. So it's okay if someone's not using your stuff. It's not a personal slight against you, and also it doesn't mean they're an idiot if they don't get it. You know, if they're brutally honest with you, that's a good thing, because that gives you a base to work from, as opposed to someone being like, yeah, it's all fine, we love it. Listen to other people. Be aware that you might feel like you have the best ideas, but chances are you don't. And this has been, you know, I think a big journey for me is going, actually, let's just kick a load of stuff into the wild and see what sticks. And then be open to challenge. So because we work in facts and figures, we can often feel like we've got the objective answer on things. You know, I go back to that example of you can be right and alone. Like, yeah, we can put ourselves at the top of a hill and shout at everyone about all the numbers we've got, but actually they'll just turn around and go to another village, right? So being able to understand where you can add value and where you can't is huge. And also being able to go, yes, I've got an objective view here, but do I have a view of player intent? Probably not, no. Maybe this person does. And then in terms of resources for the stuff, this isn't a sales pitch, I get no money from d.school, but there is some really good stuff at the Institute of Design at Stanford if you're interested in this. They actually have a ML toolkit for designers. So if you are in an analytics, and we've just started using this, if you're in an analytics team and want to help prototype how you could use algorithms with designers, they actually have very designery stuff to do that, which is really cool. IDEO, so they are kind of like, I guess, the business arm of the d.school stuff. So one of the, it's either the other way around, I think one of the IDEO founders is a d.school kind of alumni. They have the field guide to human-centered design, which kind of has a lot of these tools and tips in. And then this is a terrible cutout, but this is what Amazon was giving me as a rep, and it kind of fits with those. Innovators Toolkit, so this has stuff on jobs to be done if you're interested in that. And generally how to get stuff out in the wild and test it quickly.